the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, a sale on exigencies and necessaries but not sufficients at the Logic Warehouse leads to empty shelves in the conditionals department. Arcs, mittens, and a pail of frozen air. Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Uncompromising Honor. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Baen Senior Editor Tony Daniel. This week we have part one of a roundtable discussion with Michael Z. Williamson and several of the writers featured in the new anthology Freehold Defiance. This is a collection of short stories set in Michael Z. Williamson's Freehold universe. This takes place during the climax of the war between the libertarian world of Graine and Earth's underhanded and oleaginous United Nations. Along with MZW, we have Kevin Ikenberry, Christopher and Jaime DiNote, and Phillip Wohlrab. And we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor. Now here's the news. Hey, it's the May Rubies and Rust Catherine Asaro ebook sale. To celebrate the mass market paperback publication of Catherine Asaro's The Vanished Seas, Baen eBooks has major discounts on all ebooks by Catherine Asaro. The Vanished Seas is the third book in Catherine Asaro's excellent science fiction and mystery series, featuring the tough Major Bajan, who hails from the deepest of planetary ghettos, but whose investigation into wrongdoings frequently shakes the highest levels of intergalactic empire. During May, get $2 off the ebook of The Vanished Seas and get $1 off all other Catherine Asaro ebooks, including The Bronze Skies, Undercity. These are part of the Major Bajan series, plus dollar discounts on Sunrise Alley, Diamond Star, and Carnelians. These are available wherever Baen ebooks are distributed. Sale ends May 31st, 2021 at the crack of June. Hey, we have May e-arcs for you this month. Now, an e-arc is the path coffee takes when dispersed from a squeeze bulb, or better yet, a wineskin, in microgravity as it interacts with the random air currents and ends up in the astronaut's mouth or his or her nose. It doesn't matter as long as there's caffeine in it. No, that is not what an e-arc is at all. An e-arc is an electronic advanced reading copy, which is a book that you can get sometimes months in advance, and in this case, about 3 months in advance. What these are is the copy-edited version of the book, the galley version of the book in e-arc form. We'll sell it to you early so you can catch up on your favorite series or try new stuff before anybody else gets to it. The e-arcs for May are Monster Hunter Bloodlines by Larry Correia. Hey, this is the new solo Monster Hunter novel from Larry Correia, and you can have it in May. It's coming out in August. Lock and Load for Hunting Monsters. The Chaos God Asag is still out there spoiling for another chance to unravel reality. And when Owen Pitt and the MHI team discover that one of Isaac Newton's ward stones is being auctioned off, they attempt to lay hands on the magical superweapon to fight Asag. But before MHI can get it, the stone is nicked. Now Owen and MHI find themselves in a race against time and monsters to acquire Newton's stone and destroy Asag once and for all. Also out in e-arc form is Saving Proxima by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson. The answer lies among the stars. 2072. At the Lunar Farside Radio Observatory, an old-school radio broadcast is detected in an unknown language coming from an impossible source, Proxima Centauri. It seems the Proximans are facing an extinction-level disaster. Now, by traveling speeds required to arrive before disaster strikes at Proxima, humans will learn firsthand the time-dilating effects of Einstein's special relativity and be forced to ponder ultimate questions. Are we alone in the universe? And what if I return younger than my own children? Finally, out in eARC right now is World Breakers, edited by Tony Daniel, yours truly, and Christopher Rocchio. Brute force, intransigent defiance, adamantine will. These are the hallmarks of the AI tank. Formed from cold still and superpowered computing brains, these gigantic tanks, with the firepower of an entire army, have been the decisive factors in interplanetary battle. But are humans worthy of the extraordinary instruments of war that they have created? Stories of world breakers and world makers in the great tradition of Keith Laumer's Bolos, from David Weber, Larry Correia, Win Spencer, and more. World Breakers, edited by Tony Daniel and Christopher Rocchio, Saving Proxima by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson, and Monster Hunter Bloodlines by Larry Correia are now available as eARCs at Baen.com, exclusively at Baen.com. Check them out. This is part one of a two-part roundtable discussing Freehold Defiance. Part two will be available next time on the podcast. Hey, I want to welcome Michael Z. Williamson, Jaime and Christopher DiNote, and Phillip Wohlrab. Everybody's got like call signs on this one. I guess Mike is Mad Mike. I don't know. Yep. and I'm Tony D, because there's another one who is the head of the Jedi, my boss, and welcome. Thanks for
good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having.
Well, let me talk about each of you a little bit, and then we'll get to our reason for gathering. Jaime DiNote is a veteran of the Florida Army, and Jamie's the girl one, right? Yes, thank you. The Florida Army National Guard and U.S. Army Reserves, and has mobilized for Operation Noble Eagle, providing air defense for the National Capital Region. She holds a BA in Criminal Justice from Seattle University. She is currently residing in the Florida Panhandle as a full-time Air Force spouse to husband and usual co-author Chris, as a stay-at-home mom to her daughter Remy as well. This is her first solo publication in this book. Oh, wait, I think Kevin showed up. Let's admit him and see if he's here. There he is.
And we have Eichenberry.
Excellent. Excellent. Speaking of, hey, Kevin, can you hear us?
I got you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry about being late. Work ran a little bit late today.
Speaking of Kevin Ikenberry is a lifelong space geek and retired Army officer. As an adult, he managed the U.S. Space Camp program and served as a space operations officer before the Space Force was a thing. He's an international best-selling author, award finalist, and a core author in the wildly successful Four Horsemen universe. His 11 novels include a bunch of them. Sleeper Protocol's one of them, and the latest, I think, is Fields of Fire. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
He's co-written several novels with amazing authors, and he is an active member of Sigma, the science fiction think tank that Chuck Gannon is also part of as well. Who we got left? Phillip and Mike. Phillip Wohlrab has spent time in the United States Coast Guard and has served for more than 14 years in the Virginia Army National Guard, serving as a medic attached to an infantry company. He earned the title Doc the hard way while serving across 2 tours in Iraq. He came home and continued his education, earning a Master of Public Health degree. In 2016, he currently works as a DoD contractor, designing war games for the United States Air Force. Cool. And with occasional work for the United States Space Force. He also does game design work for the civilian market. And editor of the book and one of the authors is, of course, Michael Z. Williamson. It's also set in his world, is his IP, as they say. Is variously an immigrant from the UK and Canada, a retired veteran of the U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force with service in the Middle East, a consultant on disaster preparedness and military matters to private clients, manufacturers, TV and movie productions, and occasional DoD elements. Bladesmith, very good Bladesmith, award-winning and best-selling editor and author. His hobby of collecting weapons has led him into an arms race in which he outguns Barbados and Iceland so far, according to this.
So far.
You may be inching up on some other countries as well.
Well, we got 3 more guns this week. So,
Did
did you get Chris DiNote?
Was that?
Did you cover Chris?
Oh,
DiNote?
I didn't. Let's get that. Chris DiNote has served over 21 years in the United States Air Force and Air National Guard in Pennsylvania and Ohio. He has deployed for Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and Noble Eagle. Chris is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and the USAF Weapons School. He holds an MA in Military History from Norwich University and a Master's in Strategic Studies from the Air War College. Chris also plays saxophone and bass guitar and has performed in several bands. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, raised in South New Jersey, and currently resides in the Florida Panhandle with his wife sitting next to him, and usual co-author Jaime and their daughter Remy. This is his second work of fiction.
Other than all the EPRs he's written.
That doesn't include his dissertation. All right, let me
no comment.
Just a moment. Let me my computer's telling me that I'm not plugged in. Let me make sure I'm plugged in over here.
Second acknowledged work of fiction, let's put it that way.
Well, I'm sure Kevin has seen his fair share of OERs that are a little exaggerated, maybe perhaps.
What does the ODR stand for?
Just a little.
OER, Officer Evaluation Review. We call them OPRs in the Air Force, but I figure with the Army, all the Army folks around, I had to translate.
Well, we are gathered here today. Out now at booksellers everywhere and doing quite well is Freehold. This is the 3D version. Freehold Defiance, edited by Michael Z. Williamson, and has a lot of other great co-authors as well. These are the ones that we could attract with the honey of fame just by saying they could be on the podcast, and they showed up. So let's Mike, maybe start us off by telling us where this is in your Freehold world, and this is the third collection of anthologies that are set. I was in the first one, which was Forged in Blood.
Yeah, Forged in Blood goes through the universe. It starts before, it goes through, comes after. Resistance and Defiance are both locked into the war time frame. And so for Resistance, we had a interwoven timeline. Every event that happened was, if it happened during one of those stories, was relevant to the story it was brought up. So there's 4 stories that are connecting text and a bunch of episodic ones. It was a lot of work, which was very rewarding. This came about, there were some additional stories we didn't get a chance to put in. There was a couple things we needed that didn't happen, but we got them done. Since we were doing another volume, I put the word out, recruited some writers. Some people already had some ideas, and so we put together another one. So all these stories are in the correct order for the timeline for the universe. They're not necessarily as connected and interspersed as the others, and each one is sequential rather than interwoven.
So Freehold Defiance stories take place after Freehold Resistance?
No, same time, overlapping.
They're overlapping, but
Yep.
it's just during the UN assault on the world of Graine, or Graine, or however the hell you say it.
Grania, yeah.
Graine.
If I ever do another universe, I will pick something easier to pronounce.
Yes. Because I've been interviewing you for years and I still can't say it right. So explain what Freehold is and why the hell the UN is so pissed off that it exists, so that we can have a baseline here.
Yeah, every time. It's a very laissez-faire society. It was colonized, wealthy in operations and resources, and they got around to bureaucracy last. I mean, the first thing you got to do is stay alive. Then you got to start developing wealth and infrastructure, and then you worry about having a bureaucracy, and they largely have decided that's not something they want to put a lot of resources and effort into. There's a couple of other systems I've referenced that are heading the same way, but not quite as prominently. And
some have even said it might be a libertarian world, although you sometimes shy from that.
Yeah, and it's certainly got libertarian aspects. I'm more anarcho-capitalist, but it's largely, there is a government. It's a very limited government, even more so than the U.S. was originally. And for the time being that we're writing, it's staying that way. So,
and the UN.
Well, it's the old story that they're very successful, and as we're seeing with certain lockdown measures at present, being successful makes you the enemy of the people who don't like the fact that you're successful. Yeah, how dare you do well when the rest of us aren't? And so they decide to invade. And since there's politicians running the war, rather than doing the smart thing and simply locking down logistics and transport, they decide they're going to actually physically invade the planet, which is about the stupidest thing you can do. But how many times have governments done stupid things in war? And then it turns into a quagmire very quickly.
The UN is Earth's government, but it also has a sort of suzerainty or hegemony.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, over a bunch of colony worlds, and I referenced in Angel Eyes, and Eichenberry's story here covers how there's stuff going on elsewhere in the universe, where the footprint is expanding because the government recognizes this is going to be an ongoing issue.
Well, let's talk about Kevin Ikenberry's story, since it's the first one. Sure. In the he and Kevin J. Anderson wrote Trouble in Paradise, it's called. Now this actually doesn't happen on Graine. It happens on what's the name of this world? Meiji, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Meiji.
And we open up with Elwood, and the connection is that he is a blazer. And which one is the novel where we find out the hell that they train blazers in? The Weapon, yeah, which is a novel, and which is so he is from Graine, and he's a special operations guy. What's he doing there, and what's going on as we begin the story?
Well, he's trying to get home. He has a sick father, and has been out doing missions in the rest of the Federation, if you want to call it that. And then he just wants to get home. He's very driven to be able to go home and see his father, because the last communications he had was his dad was dying, and that's his motivation. And
why can't he just go?
Well, because he's a blazer.
There's a war on.
There's a war.
And the UN are looking for guys like him. So he's been trying to get off the planet for quite some time, and has had a couple of opportunities, but has been forced by circumstance just to give those up. And in this particular case, he has another circumstance where he decides to make a choice to not be on the transport and rescue some kids in need, essentially.
Yeah. Now that longing to get back to his dad is he's a nicely created character, and we understand why he wants to get back. Which is his dad's dying, but there's a connection there, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, the call for home for a soldier is something that's very, very poignant and very true. When you're deployed someplace and all you want to do is be home by your family, that's something you have to deal with every day.
Yeah. How did he get stuck on Meiji?
I don't think we ever really got into that. I think it was just a matter of just saying that he's been trying to work his way home and just had not been able to get there.
And that's where he is at the time. Yeah. But, which happens. Transports can put you all kinds of places.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so describe the world a little bit. It's you describe it as cloudy and clean, sort of. Is that
well, most of the story itself
Singaporean in a way, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it takes place at night, and it being that it's a Japanese focused world, Meiji means paradise in Japanese. So that's where the title comes from.
I didn't know that.
we kind of envisioned it that way. And then with talking about it being cloudy and clean, my last experience in Japan was on Hokkaido several years ago for an army exercise. And the city of Sapporo is the cleanest city I've ever seen in my life, to the point that we made a turn to go down a street that we thought was a street, and it was an alley. And the only way that I knew that it was an alley was a grease trap behind a restaurant. It was immaculate. I just had never seen anything like that. So kind of driving on that was kind of the scenery play with the story as we created it.
Mm-hmm.
And, writing with an up and coming writer like Kevin J. Anderson, I just kind of gave him some things, and he just kind of took off. So.
Yeah. I know. And you had to go in and clean up his mess.
Oh yeah, totally.
So, this is a joke, by the way. So,
absolutely.
I invited Kevin Anderson, and he said, sure, he'd be happy to. He likes, exploring other universes, and then he said he'd like to have Eichenberry help him. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great combination. Kevin and Kevin.
And we had just finished writing a story for Chris Kennedy's Trouble in the Wind anthology. So it was just kind of the perfect timing where he was like, "Hey, you want to do this one too?" Yeah, why not?
This is your second effort with Kevin.
It is. It's my second one with Kevin.
Cool. All right. So he makes this run through a bunch of shipping containers, and he sees something. What does he see, and how does it affect him?
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to set everything up without revealing too much, but at the same time, let's get the emotional meat of this thing out there.
Sure. He basically comes upon an enclosure that is full of kids that have been separated from parents that are under armed guard, and it really kind of pisses him off. And he doesn't fully understand what's going on. He sees this happening, and he's trying to talk to one young boy that's come through the fence because they're getting out of the enclosure and trying to find extra food and water. And he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he sees this, and it's really kind of just infuriates him. And so as he's looking around, he ends up finding his way into one of his hiding spaces, and there are a couple of locals that are there who are kind of the manifestation of the resistance on the planet. And he basically learns from them that the UN has been separating kids from parents to force them to work and force them into basically obedience. And again, that just kind of drives his thought process and continues to make him mad. And he just figures that he needs to do something to help this situation because nobody else can.
Yeah. And so you get children in danger and a man who is equipped to do something about it. Then we jump over to another point of view, which is is he the commanding officer of the world, or
he's essentially like the district commander kind of guy. He's in charge of UN forces there on the planet.
And his wife is heavily connected with a shipping concern.
Yes.
And there's a lot of it's interesting because in this story we point out a lot of the fact that the UN is utterly corrupt, which we get in Mike's stuff, but we see a real good example of it here as well.
And it was kind of fun to play that out with the corruption and with Sora being a shipping heiress. Essentially, her parents have had this massive corporation that's been serving the entire galaxy essentially. And to see her recognizing what's going on and making the kind of putting the dots together and seeing just how bad things are. She'd had an inkling before, and she'd been a little bit unsure of things, but as she starts to see again the situation with the children and how things are developing, she also feels like she has to take a stand. And for her, it's particularly dangerous because not only would she be turning on her husband and the local government, but she'd also be turning against her family, which is a very anti-traditional kind of stance.
Yeah, there is this sort of play of honor, a definite Eastern sort of feel to her, in that it's what she's doing by supporting this awful husband of hers is so dishonorable that she just can't. In a way, she is making an honorable choice. She just maybe can't explain it or won't
Absolutely.
be able to. One other thing is, which has a big symbolism in the story, and I think was really cool, was what is that thing with the necklace?
I'll be honest, as I was writing that, I wanted to find a connection that would show exactly what her feelings were towards her husband and how her relationship with him had changed, so that it becomes it's a symbolic device later on in the story, as you know, and being able to just kind of show that and show what she's been looking for in a husband and in her situation doesn't exactly match up with what she has now. And she's recognized that there is this massive change in this man over the course of time. And as he's grown to positions of authority, he has certainly changed. And him being unable or without the patience to do the necklace for her before they go to the big social event.
Because that's the thing, right? It's he's supposed to put the thing on her whenever she wears it, right?
Exactly. And he is too busy and too self-absorbed to do so. And so when it comes back in later in the story, that I think it's a really cool moment that it's done again, but from that other perspective.
Yeah. So explain one other thing before we leave it at that, probably, is what are they doing with these kids? What is
So the sole motivation was to separate the kids from the parents, to force them into, again, obedience. What we want you to do, what we're telling you to do. And I don't think we actually kind of really specified what the UN was trying to get the parents to do, except other than work, right? Just being the blue collar labor force.
They're charging them exorbitant. They're charging them ransoms. So some of them presumably could pay,
essentially,
but most
yes.
of them can't.
Exactly. It's basically just forced labor in a sense to make them have to pay this exorbitant fee to get their kids out. And it's something that none of them are going to be able to do in any short amount of time. So you've got these kids that are in this deplorable situation and horrible conditions, and then parents who they can't do anything to get the kids out. That becomes, again, that's kind of the swell of motivation for both Elwood and for Sora to take action.
Yeah. And it's all justified by UN speak.
Well, this is like the end of the Roman Empire. The governors have a significant amount of power, and not everything is getting reported back. In any organization, there's a certain amount of corruption, and it doesn't mean everyone's corrupt, but there comes a point where it's endemic to the system. It's just rampant, and there can be perfectly honorable, perfectly decent, perfectly honest people, and there are some of them in some of the stories, but the graft and corruption underneath, pollutes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a very moving story, and cool, and full of action, and got some really well conceived characters. Liked it a lot. Speaking of good people who are in bad situations, perhaps we can talk about Jaime's Province of Man. Which is tell us about Sam and where he finds himself and who he is.
Sam is he's a high-spirited cherry lieutenant. He's just out of training. He's a reservist. He doesn't live and breathe for the UN. He wants to be a lawyer. And he gets brought into this mission by his mentor, who has known this commander forever, and he's like, oh, this is going to be sweet. And then everything goes to hell.
Is this guy is like a former professor or at law school or something like that? His mentor?
Yes. He's like an adjunct professor.
Mm-hmm.
Basically something like that. He's a full-time lawyer in their area, adjunct professor, and also a reservist.
So how did they end up in? I mean, they were both in the reserve from this area, from like Tennessee, right? Or
I just sort of said, hey, this is where this unit is going.
Yeah,
they were in the chute.
And yeah, so they've been. You should really write what you know, Jaime, instead of trying this crazy far out stuff. So sounds like you might have done that. So all right, so they're deployed on Graine, and they are in the shit, man. What is the situation they find themselves in? This is all UN troop point of view, by the way, right?
Yes, all of it.
Who are the bad guys in a way? But Sam's not a bad guy. In a way,
right? It's I wanted to make that a little bit more complicated. So they embed themselves on this mountainside, 1,000 miles away from Jefferson, and freak accident, they are completely isolated.
Oh, it wasn't a freak accident. It was a rebel attack that did tremendous damage, and yeah, they're isolated.
They're completely cut off, no means of communication, and isolation does funny things to people.
And not to mention that Hire is kind of preoccupied at the moment, and so isn't exactly in a hurry to come find
another base blew up. Okay, let's another. Yeah. It was covered in the previous anthology. Another base just got hit by an orbital strike. So Hire.
So they're on their own.
Yeah.
And his wonderful mentor has a heart attack and dies. So he's just getting deeper, and he thought this would be sort of like, I guess, like a lot of
thought it would be Kuwait, and it ended up being Afghanistan.
Yeah, like this is going to be a learning experience for me, a step in my career. Yes. And it turns out like, this, and you're suddenly life and death situation. So, and so describe sort of some of the things he sees and how he reacts at first. And I mean, this is all about the moral choices that you have to make in such that people in the military, or just people have to make in such circumstances, right? And what are some of those?
At first, he's really sort of getting acquainted with combat. He knows it. He knows what the legalities are. He knows
rules of engagement.
Yeah, he knows the rules of engagement, but he hasn't really internalized the reality of combat. So he's following the lead of senior officers, of the NCOs, trusting that they're going to square him away and make sure he knows what he's doing. But as time goes on, he starts to question and says, no, this is not right. People tell him, shut up, it's fine. And they start butting heads more and more.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just
himself.
Somebody blows a guy away in front of him, for instance. And
yes. That's really his breaking point of there is so much going on that's just wrong.
Yeah. How
he's
does
trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. So this is like one of those really messed up, a stereotypical way of thinking about it maybe is it's like a really messed up platoon in a Vietnam movie, in which, they've lost their moral compass because they just are not fighting for something that any of them thinks is worth it. Or is that, I mean, why is the UN such a problem here? I mean, why can't they just fight and beat these dang freeholders? What is the poison within that? I mean, that's the question of the story, of course. But I'm wondering how does an army get corrupt like this? I mean, you guys should know, you're in it.
That's the kind of corruption that's bred into these kinds of units. Like,
What
those are the people that succeed.
What made this work? I got Jamie's story about the same time Justin Watson sent his in, and they're very similar bases with entirely different outcomes. One is a very honorable unit that's determined it's going to do everything properly regardless of the outcome. You know, they understand ultimately the war is fruitless, but they're going to be honorable, and that's their stock in trade.
It seems like a bad idea too, though.
Yeah, but then, you know, her unit starts off as well, whatever we got to do to make it work. And you know, I mean, they've seen some horrible things. I mean, you know, yes, they're acting like complete assholes, but they've watched people be tortured by the enemy. They've seen things up. They realize their main base has just been wiped off the map. You know, they're not reacting well. You know, they might have come in with the same intention. Well, we're going to be, you know, good and honorable, and then there's nothing about it that is. So it's a great 1-2 punch between the two stories.
They're low on supplies. They're in survival mode.
Is this this is the one where they were like given a clip each?
Yeah.
It's like, why?
They were supposed to be resupplied,
right?
And then the base got wiped out.
Yeah. When I was I spent some time in Kuwait, and we had a C-141 landing every 10 minutes during the day. And then at night, they reconfigured the flight line, and a C-130 took off in theater about every 10 minutes. As soon as the flight line and air path was clear, another one lifted. There was a sandstorm. They flew anyway and accepted engine damage. I've got a unit commendation medal because we maintained, I think, 98% operational achievement in a war zone during sandstorms. And you know, if aircraft had problems, we just unloaded it. The cargo units unloaded it, reloaded another one, because everything on those aircraft was fuel, ammunition, water, and food for the guys in Afghanistan. You know, it had to keep going. It could not stop. As soon as one of those planes missed, somebody was going to be short of supplies. And if it was 2 or 3 in a row, it was going to be a problem. The logistics is what makes it work. So these guys are in the ass end of nowhere. The base is gone. They have nothing coming in. They're already outnumbered by the rebels. They're scavenging, and they're, you know, reverting. They're becoming feral.
Yeah, they just have to, and their moral, any moral guide they have has been cut off. The guy died that could actually that had a conscience.
He's their Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because what she kind of did was expose like the whole idea of toxic leadership and toxic unit cultures. So what you end up seeing is like a unit that looked good on the surface, but underneath that there was a lot going on, which you know is kind of the extremes of the experience in the military. You're in great units with great people, and then everybody has that assignment where you're sitting there going, you witness the exact opposite of the way things are supposed to be and how they're supposed to work. So I mean, of course I get to read it as she's working on it, you know, and take a few passes at it like we did when we work on each other's stuff. And it's sitting there going, holy smoke, you're really getting at some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, quite a bit of research went into it too. So you mentioned Vietnam. So, hey, you read up on My Lai, you read up on basically insurgent wars in Africa and Ireland and the Balkans as well that goes on. You watch documentaries like Karandal or Restrepo were good influences. And, you know, it's stuff like that. And it just all, you know, so watching her pull that all together, it was like, this is going to be a powerful and impactful story when it's done.
Well, it is. And it's kind of a horror story for Sam. You feel very sorry for the guy. That's
an interesting real world bit that I realized at the time, and it's still relevant for this. All the incidents at Abu Ghraib prison. Colonel Steve Boyer, a JAG officer, was supposed to deploy over there, but he was a U.S. congressman, and Congress would not let him go. Now, if there had been a colonel, lawyer, congressman in charge of that prison, do you think half of that stuff would have happened? But he wasn't, and someone else was there, and it's like, well, you know, as long as it's quiet, and you know, and then it rapidly got out of hand, you know, just bit by bit.
Yeah. You just have to have one person that says, this is bullshit, stop.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
who's in a position to make it stick.
It's a great story, and a very nice debut, Jaime. That was part one of a two-part roundtable discussion of Freehold Defiance. Part two will be available next time on the podcast. Here is another entry in David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor. Honor keeps her promise. The Solarian League. For hundreds of years they have borne the banner of human civilization. But the bureaucratic mandarins who rule today's League are corrupt and looking for scapegoats. They've decided the upstart Star Kingdom of Manticore must be annihilated. Uncompromising courage. Honor Harrington has worn the Star Kingdom's uniform for half a century. Very few know war the way Honor Harrington does. So far, hers has been a voice of caution. But now the Mandarins have committed atrocities such as the galaxy has not known in 1,000 years. They have finally killed too many of the people Honor Harrington loves. Uncompromising vengeance. Now Honor Harrington is coming for the Solarian League, and hell is riding in her wake. And now, David Weber's Uncompromising Honor.
Sol System. Solarian League. The screaming alarm yanked Rear Admiral Bethany Ningju out of a deep sleep. She bolted upright in her bunk, reaching for the bedside comm key before her eyes were fully open. Battle stations! Battle stations! The strident voice filled every compartment, melding with the alarm. All hands, battle stations! This is not a drill! Battle stations! An icicle went through Ningju and the voice cut off, in her sleeping cabin at least, as her hand came down on the comm key and overrode the speakers. Ningju, she said, swinging her feet to the deck. Talk to me. Commander Rongwala, ma'am. The voice on the other end was flat, as hard as an iron bar. If it hadn't identified itself, Ningju would never have recognized Daiichi Rongwala, SLNS Andromeda's executive officer. We're picking up a major hyperfootprint, ma'am. It's right on top of us. Define right on top, she snapped. Under 8 million kilometers, ma'am. Ningju went white. 8 million kilometers was less than 27 light seconds. How big is it? She demanded. So far, we've got over 300 point sources, ma'am. Ningju's mind froze. 300 point sources? That was insane. Her entire squadron consisted of only 8 Mikasa-class heavy cruisers, but what in God's name could... Her heart seemed to stop. There was only one place that many ships could have come from, and they could be here for only one purpose. Get on the comm! Raise them, now! Your Grace, we have what looked like 8 Sally heavy cruisers at 7.8 million kilometers, Captain Rafe Cardonis said. Closing velocity about 35,000 kps. Not sure from their vectors what they're doing out here, but we're right on top of them. They've just brought up their sidewalls. I see them, Rafe, Honor Alexander Harrington replied. She gazed down into the tactical plot, never raising her eyes to look at Cardonis on her command chair comm display, and her flag captain bit his lip. He'd seen her like this, or almost like this, once before, the night before her duel with Pavel Young. But no, he thought, she hadn't been like this even then. She'd been focused, lethal, determined, prepared to pay the price of sacrificing her entire career to avenge the death of the man she'd loved, but she'd still been her, still been Honor Harrington. Today, she was a stranger, a terrifying stranger. Shall I challenge them, ma'am? Lieutenant Commander Brantley asked from communications. No, she said flatly, and looked up from the plot at last. Eyes like frozen brown flint met Cardonis's on the display. Take them out, she said. Commander Gregoire Koenig exploded from the lift car onto Andromeda's command deck. He hadn't bothered with a skin suit. In fact, he was shoeless and wore only trousers and a t-shirt. But Daiichi Rongwala leapt out of the command chair at the center of the bridge with enormous relief. "Captain on the bridge," the quartermaster of the watch barked. "As you were, everyone," Koenig snapped. He flung himself into the vacated command chair and spun it to face his tactical officer. "Status?" "Still more of them coming over the wall, sir." Lieutenant Commander Paulson's voice quavered. "We're up to almost 500 now." Koenig blanched. Crew Ron 572 was supposed to be conducting a simple training maneuver in the safest star system in the entire league. None of its units had ever imagined anything like this in their worst dreams. "The Admiral's on the way to the flag bridge, sir," Rangwala told him. "Should be there by now." Koenig jerked a choppy nod. As soon as Ningju reached her station, they'd have to... "Missile launch!" Ivan Paulson said suddenly. "Multiple missile launches!" An icy fist punched Gregoire Koenig in the center of his chest. His eyes sped to the master plot, and every drop of blood drained out of his face as dozens of missile icons blazed suddenly upon it. The time of flight number flashed its crimson warning, and there was no time to even think about escaping them. Andromeda's hypergenerator was completely powered down, and at those missiles' acceleration, they would reach his ship in barely 90 seconds. "Launching counter missiles," Paulson said, and Andromeda quivered as her launcher spat a pitiful salvo of CMs at that torrent of destruction. "Get them on the comm," Koenig said. "Tell them we surrender." "We're trying to raise them, sir," his comm officer said. "We haven't gotten through yet." "Ma'am," Mercedes Brigham said very quietly in Honor's ear, "they can't hurt us." Honor said nothing. She simply watched the missiles track across the plot, and Nimitz flattened his ears and bared his fangs from the back of her command chair. "Strike the wedge!" Bethany Ningju barked from Andromeda's flag bridge. "All units, strike your wedges now!" Rafe Cardonis drew a deep breath of relief as the Solly cruiser's wedges disappeared in the universal FTL signal of surrender. His eyes darted back to his comm, and Honor Alexander Harrington didn't say a word. "They're still coming, sir," Lieutenant Commander Paulson said. "I see it, Yvonne," Commander Koenig replied, and a strange sense of something very like calm seemed to flow through him. Not relief, just acceptance. The knowledge that every man and woman of his crew was about to die, and there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. "They must be even more pissed off by Fabius than we'd thought," a corner of his mind reflected. "But why? We only hit military targets. Sure, nobody on the ones we hit had time to evacuate, but it's not like we violated the Eridani Edict the way they did in Mesa." "Your Grace, they've surrendered," Mercedes Brigham said, and Honor looked at her. Her expression never changed, but there was something almost like puzzlement in those flinty eyes, as if she wondered what that had to do with anything. "Your Grace, they've struck their wedges." She said nothing, only looked at her chief of staff with those puzzled eyes, and Brigham reached out. She gripped her admiral's shoulders, actually shook her in her command chair. "Ma'am, Honor, they've surrendered." Their eyes locked, and then suddenly Honor shivered. She closed her eyes, her nostrils flared, and her hands tightened like talons on the armrests of her command chair. "Yes, they have, damn them." The knife-edged words were so soft, only Brigham could possibly have heard them. Then her eyes opened again. "Abort the engagement, Captain Cardonis," she said clearly, coldly, while Nimitz snarled protest behind her. The time to attack range readout flashed downward, and every eye on Andromeda's bridge was glued to it. 40 seconds. 35. 30. No one spoke. There was nothing to say, no further orders to give. The tide of destruction came in ludicrously slowly for a missile engagement, because the range was too short for it to reach anything like maximum velocity. Individual missiles, even Manticoran missiles, would be easy meat for the point defense clusters when they came into range. But there were over 500 missiles in that salvo. If every single cluster Cruron 572 could bring to bear stopped 2 of them, 400 would still get through, and without even sidewalls to protect them. 20 seconds. 15. 10. Gregoire Koenig drew a deep breath, the last he would ever draw, and held it as his ship's death roared down upon him. And then, suddenly, every single one of those missiles swerved away from its target, arced wide of the squadron, and vanished in a holocaust of self-destruct commands. Koenig wouldn't have believed the silence on his bridge could grow even more intense. He would have been wrong. That silence lingered for 10 crackling seconds. Then his comm officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission." "Put it up," Koenig said. "Yes, sir." The commander leaned back in his chair, vaguely aware his hands were trembling, and a woman in the black and gold of the Royal Manticoran Navy appeared on the Mastercom display. "I am Admiral Harrington, Royal Manticoran Navy," she said, and something deep inside Gregor Koenig shrank from that soprano scalpel. "I accept your surrender in the name of the Grand Alliance. Be aware that any resistance to my boarding parties will be met with instant lethal force, and that my acceptance of your surrender is contingent upon the surrender of your intact databases. If those databases are not intact, or if any resistance is offered to my boarding parties by any individual, I will regard all of your personnel as having violated the terms of your surrender and act accordingly." She smiled, and somehow it was the most frightening smile Koenig had ever seen. "You won't like it if that happens," she said very, very softly. "But I will."
That was another entry in the complete audiobook serialization of Uncompromising Honor by David Weber. And that's it for the podcast, thanks to Audible.com and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. And a psychic leopard, a spaceship forged of Damascus steel just because we can, and a quiver of lightning rods that store the stuff and shoot it back out, plus thanks and praise to Kevin Ikenberry, Christopher DiNote, Jaime DiNote, Phillip Wohlrab, and Michael Z. Williamson, editor and authors of Freehold Defiance. Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.